Hey, y'all, welcome to another great episode of Unapologetic with your host, Vincent Balducci. As always, the views and opinions expressed here on Unapologetic and on MAD are our own and just our own, and do not represent the views and opinions of any other person or group. With that being said, do y'all like statues? If so, please hit that stars button down below. Stars help us put up statues. Well, y'all, I have a very good guest today, one of my good friends and fellow compatriots, Corey, aka the Arkansas Rebel, who also created the Ozarks Flaggers. So, Arkansas Rebel, tell us a little bit about yourself and how you got involved with the heritage and defending the heritage.
Well, I grew up in Johnson County, Arkansas, and I've always been a deep roots down the South guy, even up until when I was in college. And even though God bless me here, that I did almost fall prey to Marxism, because what does Marxism do? They usually look for the disenfranchised and those that they can brainwash. But yeah, I pretty much got into our heritage protection and whatnot when they first started attacking us back when I was in college, my junior year of 15. And one of the first things I did was join a flagging event. I'm not sure you remember, down in Arkansas, we had like 5 or 4 people getting in their trucks with their battle flags and whatnot, and we just en masse in these cities like Fayetteville, Conway, Russellville, and there's me and my best friend and roommate, we ended up on 5 News. They caught the back of the truck and see me holding with. I didn't have a flagpole to hang on to, because one of my flags was 5 foot, I believe 5 by 8 feet, and so I took it to a walking stick and used I can remember, I used what are those black things you use? Zip ties.
Oh, zip tie?
I zip tied it and hung it out like this with the window down, and you don't see me, but you see my arm hanging on to the dear life of the flag, and it was just amazing. And since then, up until then, I didn't even know about the Sons of Confederate Veterans. I knew nothing about them. I never knew they even existed. And before I went to college, I was always very big on history, very big. What really began with a really awesome 5th grade social studies teacher, who was very into going to Ren Fair, going around the world, and it was the most. If there was a trophy for most patriotic class, it would have been ours. Watching movies like Sergeant York and Johnny Tremaine, and if it wasn't for her, I probably wouldn't have pursued my history degree at all, or asked my elders a bunch of questions where they were when, like my great grandfather being a Pearl Harbor survivor that I didn't even know that there was a picture of him that I held dear, and this was a week before the attack. The picture was taken, and it was a picture of in his whites in front of a straw hut at Pearl Harbor, and he was 2 ships away from where the Arizona blew and sunk. And when I started exploring more and more and learned about the Sons of Confederate Veterans, I got even more invested in my own ancestry. Where were we during the War of Northern Aggression, and what were we during that time? And I was proud to see that I had a 4 times great grandfather who I bear a striking image to when I'm beardless, and that he fought in the Georgia Regulars, who I joined under the Sons of Confederate Veterans with. And when I did more research had a 3 times great grand uncle who I look very much alike with a beard, who was at the Battle of Pea Ridge here in Arkansas. And then of course, when I found a personal connection to Lieutenant General Richard Strother Taylor, son of Zachary Taylor, and for a brief period, brother-in-law to President Jefferson Davis.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's a really lucky connection.
Oh, yes.
That's like the ultimate
indeed.
one. Next to being related to Lee, because that's another big one. When you have that relationship to Stonewall, Lee, or Forrest, that is like in the big three.
Yes.
Let alone being related somehow to Davis. I was blessed when we were doing our genealogy, and it was one of the surnames was Wheeler, and I'm like, wait a minute, General Wheeler, who just so happened to be one of my favorite generals. Lo and behold, finding that connection, we are collateral cousins. So I ended up joining MOSB under him because I was just so proud to have that ancestry. And it's great because you have people like, if we're related somehow to these big figures, we can then say, hey, you know what? We don't want you to take away our monuments, because they often find people that are collaterals to say, oh, remove the monument. Which, remember, though, I had one guy in the article, it was about this one pastor or something. He was a deviant pastor, so not really a true pastor. He was involved in deviance. He was involved in like woke Christianity, and he was all for removing, monuments. Turns out he never was related to General Lee.
Yeah, turned out he wasn't. He was an imposter, pretty much.
We have Rebel Zaza says checking in from St. James, Arkansas, Battle of Buckhorn. Ooh.
Buckhorn. I don't think I've ever heard of Battle of Buckhorn, because most of the battles and we're actually going to do a reenactment in a couple months for the Battle of Prairie Grove, and which would decide the fate of the Trans-Mississippi Front early on in the war after the debacle by Van Dorn at the Battle of Pea Ridge. And,
he messed up bad there.
Oh yes,
He's in the top 5 that tend to not do so well at strategizing.
Oh yeah, and my bone to pick with Hindman, though, who was the lead commander for the Arkansas troops at Prairie Grove, was, well, he was, how some officers are more politician than actual military men, and he had the numbers, and before he went to battle, he had the winter in camp. He was encamped before winter at Fort Smith. He had just got his men new Little Rock frocks and brand new issued infield rifles, and he was getting ready to take battle against General Herron and General Blunt. Even though he had the numbers, he could have taken the initiative and just chased Blunt, but he didn't. Rebel Saza skirmish at Buckhorn on May 5th, 64. General Shelby was ordered into position south of the Arkansas River Valley to occupy the White River and prevent its navigation in every possible manner and fashion. Oh yes, I've heard of General Shelby through him. He came through my hometown of Clarksville and pretty much chased us out. And
wow.
Similar to a situation down in Atlanta through that devil went down to Georgia, Sherman. And I believe I told you about this, that a contingent of federal troops did a number on the Arkansas women here in my home county, and looking for whether to look for men or looking for gold goods. They took a woman of the name of Letitia Howell and put her feet to the coals of the fireplace.
Oh.
Until she lost her feet.
Southern War Crimes, and was it Northern War Crimes Against Southerners? And that is a book. I don't know if her story's in there, but that's a story. Is there anywhere people can learn more about her story?
Yes, there's a book. I have it right here. It's under Bust Hell Wide Open. It's Confederate Women of Arkansas Memorial Reminiscence. It's the author is the United Confederate Veterans of Arkansas.
Confederate women.
It's called the Confederate Women of Arkansas in the Civil War. 1861 and 65. Let me find it real quick.
Oh,
Pretty much after the fall of the Confederate government. Oh yes, the sketch of Miss Letitia M. Howells of Clarksville. Yeah, and at the time of the burn, by her daughter Sally E. Jordan, it is the greatest reluctance that I write the sketch of my mother's experience during the Civil War. Yet those who have urged me to so much so often to write knew that I have suffered in putting these sad particulars on paper, and they would have said, "Let them alone." Get down here. At the time, at the timing of the burning, she was her brother. At the time of the burning, her father had gone to Texas, and their brother, Captain Howell, was an ordnance officer under General James Fagan. So it was a situation where the women were left to their own devices and the men were gone, whether to fight or if things were getting bad, to get their stuff and flee, like to get everything ready and just flee. And one federal on the night of February 20th of 64, 5 or 6 federal soldiers came and demanded money, saying, "I know you have it. Everyone knows that your husband has plenty of money." When she refused to give them money, they stripped the right foot and leg and thrust it into a bed of red hot coals lying in a large open fireplace. And when they took it out, they asked her if she would tell them where the money was, and she said no. They put it back and told her that they would burn her to death if she did not tell. And it goes into detail that the flesh was cooked until it fell off from the knee to the toe.
Oh man. And y'all, could you just hearing that, I'm like cringing. And I don't know if any of y'all stubbed your toe, you know the pain in that, but imagine a burn. If you've ever been burned before, your feet hitting fire, literally, your first reaction naturally is to pull back. When you have someone forcibly holding your feet down to the flames and the hot coals, that is pain beyond imaginable. You have nerves in your feet, they're connected. There was tortures back in the day. People would hit people's feet with electrical cords. They would do that in Iraq and whatnot. This was a crime that happened under the federal flag by federal troops under the tyrant Lincoln. So when people wonder why, you have Southerners and you have people that actually know history that actually claim that Lincoln was a tyrant, this is an example why. This is what he was permitting. This was what his army was doing to people. This is what the Federals did while flying the federal colors or the USA flag. So it really makes you wonder, when people try to, attack our flags, but they cover up all the horrors that happened during the war between the states under the red, white, and blue federal flag.
Yeah. And when all this was said and done, one federal officer who heard the story pretty much said, no wonder they hate us and would fight us so much because of what we did. And these soldiers, from what it sounded like, had no officer or senior officer with them. And if you watched Gods and Generals, when they take the city of Fredericksburg, where he yells, "This is an army, not a rabble," and because they were just looting the town, and you see a guy who shove his face through a painting, running, acting a fool, and this general yelling, "Put that down, soldier," and hits him with his I don't know if it's like a stick, but it has like a stick with a leather wrap right there where you usually, you slap it on I've seen it slapped on the hand when they're holding it, like something an officer would have, but he hits him with it and he says, "Put it down, soldier."
And I remember with burns, like burns have different degrees. That's like a 4th degree burn. That's when you destroy all the tissue, and you either get amputation or you lose your feet.
Yeah, she lost her legs from the knee down.
And back then, y'all, there was no like science on how to properly do amputation. It was a very risky procedure. To get justice, to actually get limbs, they not only were very uncomfortable, but it took years after the war for even a regular veteran to get limbs, let alone a civilian that was attacked by Yankees. I thankfully have never burned my feet, but the closest I've come was to touching hot pavement with, taking my sandal off. And that was enough to make me jump up on one foot. I couldn't imagine what it's like to actually touch a hot coal. We did have, though, a family member, my grandpa took hot coals and he had them from the fireplace. He put them outside because he thought that they were completely done for. They weren't. So it was a very weird February we had. The coals had fell out and we had dry grass. So the coals plus the air on the dry grass, a sea of flames. So all of a sudden the dog's barking. Graham walks out there to go see what's going on. She opens the door, sees a sea of flames, goes, oh my gosh. Right as she puts one foot down below, one foot goes right on the hot cinders that were from the fireplace, causing her to jump back. She grabs the door. A second-degree burn she had. Thankfully it healed fully, but you had to hop on one foot. You couldn't take your foot and touch it because it would send pain ringing through your body with those nerves. Yeah. Foot burn has got to be one of the worst burns to ever get.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
That's just awful.
But imagine they forced this lady, not just her foot, but her leg into it too. Into the hot coals, torturing this poor woman for information, intending to rob her, knowing that the men are gone, that her son's not there, her husband's not there. It's just her and the women, her daughter, her niece, and her poor self.
That's insanity.
Oh yeah, and they don't talk about this in school. Not even in Arkansas history. Here in the state of Arkansas, they don't talk about it. They don't talk about, like in Clarksville, one of my hometowns here in Johnson County, Clarksville. I go bike rides and walks, and one of the things I always noticed was all the buildings were post-bellum, not pre-bellum. Because most of it was gone. A lot here in Clark, there was a church. There was a Methodist, and I found a spot where it's a parking lot now, and it was a site of the first Methodist church, and it was burnt down by Federals. And two churches, a Presbyterian and a Methodist, they were burnt, and our courthouse the courthouse at the time, it was burnt down by Federals when they came through, and those. And the churches naturally have been used for hospitals for the injured. I have no clue if they burnt them while they were inside, but I wouldn't put it past them. If they did. But pretty much between 63 and 65 to the conclusion of the war in April, it was just chaos. It was just total war.
It also brings me to think of something too, because what these Yankees did, they burned, they looted, and in certain cases, people died, so they murdered. Three little letters right there. BLM. Sound familiar, any of y'all?
Yeah.
These whole ideas are nothing new. A lot of people think, what happened in the mostly peaceful summer of love is new, it's original, it's novel. Oh, no, it ain't. It's happened before. These were the Yankees' war crimes that they were doing. They were committing these war crimes. They got away with it. Not a single person was held to justice for what they did. They got rewarded with monuments. You have General Sherman, who he has a beautiful golden monument that is up there. And obviously, it's not my language beautiful, but what other people would say, because it's gold. Golden monument right in New York.
Yeah.
Sherman came after the Native Americans after the war big time. And even, I think, did some position on there where he was attacking natives further. I wonder why those social justice warriors never thought, oh, why don't we take down Sherman? If I started a petition, it would have been remove Sherman the same way they removed General Lee. Could you only imagine the double standard people would have? Oh, don't remove Sherman. It's history. Oh, don't cut it up like they did. That's rude. That's vandalism. It's iconoclasm.
Yeah.
They would be so against that, but yet they would say it's different with our monuments. We had, and I said this on the thing and people were shocked. Listen, we're losing our monuments. So you know what? I said, if we can't have our monuments, the Federals can't have theirs. Yeah. Our state of Jersey, There was a monument to Kearney. It's in the Capitol. They're removing that. They voted. The left-wing people did this, and the right let them get away with it. They removed Kearney, who was a Union guy. He died at Gettysburg, and they replaced him with a monument of Alice Paul. Her biggest thing was getting force-fed.
And I've never even heard of this woman. I've never even heard of Alice Paul.
Biggest thing was doing a protest where she said, "I'm not going to eat," and she gets force-fed. That's pretty much the highlight of what she did. Some kind of activist.
Yeah.
Women's
suffrage.
Doing
the same thing. And they're doing the same thing up in Fayetteville, renaming a street from Archibald Yale Boulevard to the name of a slave that he sent back, that fled. And that was this gentleman's claim to fame was he fled, was captured, and sent back. And Archibald Yale was being the second governor of Arkansas, and who lost his life at the Battle of Buena Vista during the war between U.S. and Mexico. He did defend the institution of slavery, but I personally, I would never defend it. But anyone who tried to even attack it in that time, it's just, one man versus a whole. Help me out, Ben. I don't know where to put how to word it.
I get what you're saying. It's the whole idea is that, right, abolition was a Southern ideology, and there were quite a few abolitionists in the South.
Yeah.
The thing was, right, most northern states, they did gradual abolition, or in certain cases, New Jersey, a Union state, proud Union state, they had slavery until long after the war. They had it in their state constitution. It can continue on, and that took forever to even remove. So what it became was, how do we conduct abolition? And what we're seeing is people don't look at like a whole bunch of things. The war between the states, also what people call a civil war, was not about slavery, and people forget that. You had people they would do slavery up north. You had Union slave states. You had, look at Indiana. You had Indiana, Illinois, the Indiana Black Codes. They strengthened those during the war between the states because their fear was that people who were being emancipated would move up north. And they said, nope, we don't want anyone coming up here. It's emancipated.
Yeah.
New Jersey went as far to banning anyone who was freed. And they even had a case in New Jersey, a Union state, where they had someone who escaped slavery. And it was some prominent family that, took the slave in, and they found out he was a runaway. So they said, nope, we're shipping you back. So after living with them for a year and a half, they just shipped him back. And that was traditional Yankee behavior.
Yeah, it was. Yeah. And this guy fled to Canada. And this guy that they want to name
their goal was not in the North. People forget that.
Yeah.
They want to change the narrative to Lincoln was anti-slavery. He was not. They want to make it seem that Lincoln was this great emancipator. Read some of Lincoln's speeches. Lincoln was extremely pro-segregatory. And also, you have General Grant, who was also very anti-Semitic, and Grant being the last president that owned slaves.
Yeah, and he owned hundreds of slaves, and had went on record to say that had the war was about slavery, he would have offered his services to the other side, and that was his words, that the war was about preserving the Union by point of a bayonet and the butt of a gun. Is pure and simple what the war was about on the Yankee side. And I will proudly say I convinced maybe one or two people that if we wanted to, if we fought to keep slavery, if we were fighting to keep slavery, we would have passed the Corwin Amendment, which already had passed in the Senate and in the state house. By the time we were leaving, it would have been ratified. If we wanted to protect the institution of slavery, we would have stayed in the Union and ratified it, and we didn't. And we left over the Morrill Tariff, which would have ruined the Southern economy because it would
have collapsed. We were still hurting from the War of 1812. People forget that.
Yeah, we were still hurting from it. Yeah, we had a huge. And to this day, the South is, under my opinion, heavily taxed to maintain Washington. It is to this day
exploited.
Yes, we are exploited down here. Down in Texas, they they give more in taxes than what they receive back, for example.
Mm-hmm. Oh, I believe the disproportionate taxation.
Yeah.
The whole value, no taxation on representation, the same value that the first American Revolution was over, hence the first national, the resemblance.
Yes.
Our war between the states was the same exact thing. The South fought for the same reasons that the 13 colonies did during the first revolution. So really, this was our second American Revolution.
It really was. That's why the love your show. I must ask, why allow these goons to tear down statues? Why is there no pushback? There is pushback. It's just there is pushbacks, and we're not allowing it. But the problem is, in some situations we are the few, they are the many. There's only so much we can do, and kind of like the situation between Save Richmond or Save Atlanta during the war. Unfortunately, no one would make the decision which to say first. We're in the war for our culture, whether to save these big name monuments like Monuments Avenue and Jefferson Davis Highway, or we save our locals. We're unfortunately in a situation sometimes where, if it's between saving our local monuments and street names and school names, or something bigger like Monuments Avenue, some of us unfortunately would rather save our local than like what we did than Monuments Avenue, because even to an extent, kind of like 160 or plus years ago, we identify closely to our state, to our home, to our communities. Which one are we going to save first? Which one will take priority first? I would probably, if I had to pick between, it would be sad to admit that I would do more to protect Arkansas's legacy first before I travel to Virginia or Florida to save theirs, when I would do it on their behalf, but there's only so much you can do. You can stretch yourself so thin, but no, we're not allowing it. We're not allowing goons to tear down statues, and there is pushback, but unfortunately we're either A, silenced, or B, we're just they are the few, we are the few, they are the many.
That's right. And I love the explanation too, especially about being a statesman. So what Arkansas Rebel just said there is, when you're a statesman, you defend the state, and that's so important. And there's nothing wrong with that, because your state should come first. You have to protect all the monuments that are in your state. In our state, we have the one monument. It is currently in a federal property. Unfortunately, I would love to have us get possession of it. However, the one issue is, if they decide, federally, that they're going to remove all Confederate monuments, well, guess what? That cemetery monument is going away. And this is why, on certain issues like that monument at Arlington, I will be there. If they try to remove that, I'll be going after the protest peacefully, because that monument is in a cemetery on federal property. That's going to set precedents. We've already seen, Richmond was an example of seeing how far they will and can go. What happened at Richmond is Mayor LeVar Stoney, and again, people try to make this a political issue. Y'all, the Republicans hate our heritage as much as the Democrats. Maybe there's a few exceptions in there, but generally in Virginia, a majority of the Republicans were dead silent on this. They let LeVar Stoney do whatever he wanted to do. And she told the police to stand down. There had to be other police forces and other fire trucks from a town away, not Richmond, because all the police would say, I'm sorry, but I can't do anything. I was told to stand down. You have a duty when you're in an elected office to actually protect the public. So they let these rioters go through, do whatever they wanted to do, destroy the monuments. They took hammers to them. They spray painted it. They graffitied it. One gentleman had some sense knocked into him, literally. He had a monument that fell on top of his head. Hopefully he learned his lesson. And you shouldn't do that to monuments. And then they firebombed the UDC headquarters. That happened. People weren't aware of that. That was not even on the news. This was a museum, by the way. So it was their headquarters, and you had a historic library. Window was smashed. Molotov cocktail was thrown in there. Stonewall Jackson's historic battle flag burned to a crisp. Gone forever, irreplaceable.
Yeah. And when they try to put out the fire, there was significant water damage to 100-year-old books
that had to be cleaned page by page. Smoke damage too, and those books are artifacts, just some of
Yeah.
them destroyed.
And a lot, and also it also houses the genealogy of its members in that organization too. And thank God for another headquarters down south in Louisiana that did reinforced glass and bars
Yes.
to attack.
Confederate Memorial Hall in New Orleans.
Yes.
That was already built. That building was built after Reconstruction. They were smart Southerners, so it's actually built to be pretty sturdy. And those structures held true. It was attempted to be burned down in around 2017 when Trump got elected. And then they further reinforced it. So it is safe. Thank gosh.
Yeah.
But these are the things that we have to worry about. So whatever happened to the whole thing when they said, oh, the compromise, put your flags in a museum. Okay, well, headquarters burned, flag burned. Oh, you had the attack on New Orleans, trying to burn the museum down. What about putting it to history books? Y'all, have you seen how history books teach the history now? It is so woke. Yeah. They make Lincoln seem like a saint. They make Robert E. Lee seem awful when he was a lot better, in my opinion, and historical fact. The South fought for a cause that was right. People forget that. And you're not going to hear the real history. You're going to have to go digging to find the history.
Yeah.
Some of the best UDC ladies write the best. I have the cookbooks, UDC cookbooks. You learn a lot of history from them, as well as their ancestor books, because that teaches you the stories and the human behind the gray. You know, who wore the gray? Those stories are told, and that's what's so important. Is you have to get back to telling the soldier story. We're not telling the soldier story, and that's what's really doing this a disservice. Is you have woke professors that have been through the system before. They start teaching these younger minds, and they start creating that cycle again to generate more people that think a certain way instead of teaching them how to critically think.
Oh yeah, and here's one monument that I'm glad nobody's messed with, and it was up in towards Helena, Arkansas, and it's of Patrick Cleburne.
That's right.
And if you want to talk, and there was accounts of him. There's accounts of him before the Battle of Franklin, before his ill-fated fate at Battle of Franklin. He wanted slaves to be free. He was not a slaveholder. He wasn't a man of the plantation. He was not between 1 or 10% who was rich, had a plantation, and had slaves. He was an Irish boy from Cork, fresh off the boat after unfortunately he couldn't rise up through his own merit because of the systems they have up there. So he came here and tried to become a self-made man. And similar to men like Forrest and Wade Hampton, he started off as a Timbuk private and went through colonel and then later lieutenant general, and probably one of the most underrated men of the South along in the Confederacy, Patrick Reynold Claiborne.
That's right. And is he buried in Arkansas?
He's buried in Arkansas, yes.
That's right.
Yes. And I believe Commander-in-Chief Jason Boshears went out to see his grave a while back. And he's probably one of my favorite generals, both as a person and he was here. And there was some funny story behind him too. He had never seen a watermelon in his life. So one of his friends tell him he asks how to prepare it. So they tell him to put the watermelon in a boiling pot and boil it.
Oh no.
So you can imagine how that went.
That's a cook and fail, right? Cook and fail.
Yes. Because he had never seen a watermelon before, didn't know what it was. And because you don't have that in Ireland, you have potatoes, you have sheep, you have barley, and he has never seen a watermelon in his life, doesn't know what it is, and don't know how you prepare it. And when he learned of that he had been had, he chased in true angry Irishman fashion. He chased him out the door, chased after him in the street, getting ready to bust his butt.
The Irish temper. That's right. That's right. And Irish, that was a whole group of people that were always treated badly. People forget that. They went through so many hardships.
Yes.
So, a lot of tough times, tribulations, all that. And we did have a lot of Irish in the Confederacy.
Lost Scots.
Cleburne was one of them. We got to see his monument. It was beautiful in Georgia. Absolutely beautiful.
Yeah, and yeah, if you watch Gangs of New York, if you want a visual representation of the how they treat the Irish, that's the perfect representation. If it and it was how they treat them when they get off the boat, and it's just a distrust because part of it was because they were Catholic.
That's
And
right.
yeah, and yeah, and best potatoes in the UK is still Irish potatoes.
Yum.
then
I love
they,
a good
then
potato
they
dish.
Yeah, and they probably never had a red. They probably have never had a basset potato in the South. Then, if they
Or a sweet
they are
potato.
more, what's that?
Or a sweet potato.
Or sweet potato, yeah.
Good old sweet potato pie.
Or sweet potato fries, man.
Oh.
Yeah,
That
they are more.
we have the best music in the South. We
Oh,
have
we
the
do.
best food.
I think we have the most rich culture is the South,
Yes.
because if you look at the culture of the South as a whole, it's very diverse in itself, down to its food, its music, even the dialect is different. Because
Yes.
I about laughed my butt off when someone said they didn't know the linguistic difference between someone from Arkansas and somebody from Texas, and I'm like, that's fighting words right there,
That
because
is fighting words.
that is fighting words. Because if, even to this day, Texans and Arkansans aren't overly fond of each other, especially on the football field.
What's the word? Texarkana. Texarkana, is that like
Yes, that's
a mix?
Texarkana. Yeah, because it shares a border. It's literally a border town between. You're literally on the Texas side. You're either on the Texas side or the Arkansas side, or if you're unfortunate, you're on the Louisiana side probably. And
Oh,
it's literally a town called Texarkana. And
Texarkana.
and and it's also and it's unfortunately it's happened back in the 60s. It was a law enforcement nightmare. Because you ever heard of the Phantom down there?
I think so. I heard a part of it.
Yeah. Well, it was so bad that nobody knew whose problem he was, the Texas side or the Arkansas side. It was just a mess. That's why to
And
this
the
day they
laws,
didn't
how
know
they're
who.
enforced.
Hmm?
And the law, like how the law was enforced too, because that's like the other thing too. That's the one thing I always love doing. Like the one thing, it's on the books here in New Jersey. It's illegal to slurp your soup. Obviously, no one's going to enforce that and give you like a fine. So I remember I was sitting right in the border of, I believe it was New Jersey and Pennsylvania didn't have such law. So I put 1 foot over, 1 foot New Jersey. I slurped the soup, and I'm like, did I break the law? You slurping the soup? It was like a public order law that like they had it for a while. It was a manners law. You could not slurp your soup in public. But this is like back in the 1800s.
Yeah. Yeah, and in Arkansas, it's illegal to mispronounce Arkansas. It's actually in the books that it is illegal to mispronounce it.
Is that
And
the best, those laws? Like someone's going to
oh
correct that.
yes, like here's the most hilarious law, like ridiculous law that I've ever heard of. It's illegal to go whale hunting in Oklahoma, and and it's illegal. I can't remember if it's Tennessee or Kentucky to fish with a lasso. To catch a fish with a lasso. So you can imagine how stupid a person looks doing that. Or or if you want to get footloose, it's illegal to dance in public. I believe it's Branson or just Missouri as a whole. It's illegal to dance in public.
That's funny.
Yeah, like on the street.
Miss
Peggy
Peggy says,
Delaney.
I'm working in South Carolina and everyone's been telling me I sound different. I live in Alabama. I didn't know I sounded different until they told me. I've heard that too. Like,
I've heard it too.
I have friends from Virginia, and they'll go to like North Carolina and they'll, oh, wow, your dialect's different. Your accent's different. They're like, I thought I sound like the same. And they're like, no, I've been told by a lot of our fellow Southern brothers, you don't sound like a Yankee. You don't sound like you're from New Jersey. Some of them from New Jersey, they'll sound like they're from New York, like they're congested.
Yeah, they have like what's called a Jersey accent.
New Jersey.
Jersey.
Like Coffee, water.
Cool. There's a TikTok of this guy,
Water.
his dad and his girlfriend, how they pronounce like door. It's door, 0 out of 10, or coffee. It's coffee.
Or like you'll say doors on the rocks, they'll say door, Dior. I can't even say it. Door, Dior's on the rocks.
They don't say the R is what it is.
Doors on the rocks.
Doors on the rock. Yeah.
Doors on the rock. That'd be a doors on the rocks.
Yeah.
Okay.
Here in the South, yeah, we do say this, especially in Arkansas. It's door.
Door.
Yeah, we say door. And somebody said about the music being different. Like, yeah.
I did not know about New York. Oh man, illegal demand spread. And is that a newer law? It's probably something new because New York has all these crazy laws. But New York here, there was a really good Mr. Tom in this comment. Just to kind of elaborate more, because this is such a good comment. There was a lot of pushback down south when they removed the monuments. Now, in the case of Richmond, where they told the police to stand down and it was a safety issue, those mobs just came in there, all from out of town. They were not from Richmond, by the way. They were being bussed in there from what people said. Destroyed everything. And then what happened in New York? In New York, that's a state, unfortunately, where a lot of people in the city, they don't respect the heritage, they don't respect history. Like we're seeing what's happening in these art galleries now where people are throwing soup on paintings or mashed potatoes and they're gluing their hands on there. They're allowed to do that because the museum allows them to do that. The museums have gone woke.
They have, especially with New York. I'm like surprised that a lot of these left-wing people are from like, sounds bad to me say, they're literally from like the fine arts department. I'm like, where's your outrage? Because I mean, that's a 100-some-year-old painting from like Francisco Goya. Or what really bothered me though is like, because I really like Van Gogh's paintings, especially A Starry Night, and I'm like, you're gonna throw a soup, like what, and whatnot at a guy's painting who has nothing to do with the topic. Like they're like protesting about oil, and I'm like, what does Van Gogh have to do about oil? And why are you in your hand to the freaking wall? What's your point here? It's making you look childish for one. It's making you look stupid in public for two, and three. I've watched a person in a policeman, I believe, down in Italy, where they're doing the protesters who glue their hands to the asphalt, blocking traffic, and this policeman grabs this guy by his wrist, yanks it off, and God, can you imagine how bad that hurts when you don't put an adhesive to, and it thankfully didn't take the skin off or anything. It did not leave them any marks, but could you imagine how bad that hurts? Because
they feel that in the morning.
You're gonna feel that in the morning. But anywho, I'm not sure anybody knows today, but today is the 145th anniversary of the death of Nathan Bedford Forrest.
That's a really good book, Bust Hell Wide Open.
Oh yes, Bust Hell Wide Open. Yes, it took me forever to finish because I started reading it just before we went to his reinterment at Elm Springs. I was just so into it that I went through a couple hundred pages, and finally, just a week or so ago, I finished it. Especially, I would catch myself skipping chapters or two to read, what happened in the latter part of the war, and
his life after, that's by Dr. Mitchum, Dr. Samuel Mitchum.
Yes.
Did that. We have to get him on here one day, and like I'll have you, me, Victor come on. We'll have a great time, like just interviewing him, talking about, because we've all read his books, and he writes in such a way that is so powerful. It's very academic, and it's good enough writing that it keeps it going. It almost seems like it's an interview, like you almost have the Forrest there in the room with you. He writes much like, and I'm also reading this in defense of General Beauregard.
Yeah.
Past Commander-in-Chief, Mr. Larry McClooney, is also a very good author, and his writing is so casual but so scholarly, and it's that perfect balance, because when you write, you want to make sure your reader is interested and they know how to hook you and keep you in there reading it. And the same thing happened to me with Forrest, because I have the audiobook. I was reading up and trying to listen as much as possible before the funeral, that's when we finally got to meet in person at the funeral. And I'll never forget, I was like, I want to get through most of it. So I got up until where he surrendered, and I didn't get a chance to pick it up. But this book covers his life, like his birth, his parents, all that, through right before the war, during the war, after the war, and then the aftermath, his death and the legacy. And unfortunately, when that book was written, it didn't cover what happened. They removed his monument and they removed the bodies and they reburied them at Elm Springs. We're facing the same issue, going back to Mr. Tom's comment on in Richmond. People call it a monument. I don't call it a monument. It is the headstone of A.P. Hill. A.P. Hill is buried beneath. One of his descendants, Mr. John Hill, great guy. We're hoping to get him on here. He went up there. He was testifying several times, going to Virginia, taking time out of his day to go there. And the woke judge, gave this headstone. A veteran's headstone is being given to the Valentine Art Museum, which is the same art museum in Virginia that has the vandalized statue of President Jefferson Davis covered in paint, and they put this up as artwork. What does that say about someone's character, a group's character, or a museum's character, when they take a statue that's not even theirs, that belongs to the UDC, all covered in vandalism, they put that up, promoting it, saying that that's art, and then they take and they rob a veteran's headstone and they dig up the body of a veteran? Is that art? That is the ultimate form of disrespect, disgust.
Grave robbery.
I have no words that are Christian that I could say. Number one, because it ain't Christian. Number two, because it'd be censored if I can really say how I feel. So let's just leave it at that. But it's a major iconoclasm is what it is.
Yeah, and on top of that, it's just downright grave robbery. You're
That's
digging
theft.
up. It's theft. Yes,
They should hit him with a lawsuit.
I believe that's what John wants to do, and some other direct descendants of General Hill that they want to sue, because if I understand correct, if you exhume a body, and that's what happened with General Forrest. They tried to, in the cover of darkness, discreet and like a thief in the night, remove the monument or God forbid remove the body. If you do that, it's against state law to
Yes.
It's against state law and cemetery law to do it without permission, number one, and number two, it's desecration. That's pure and simple. It's desecration of a grave, and it's just downright disrespectful. Like unfortunately, I've seen pictures and videos and testimonies of BLM and Antifa taking a sledgehammer to headstones, and some going as far as to dig up these graves and flip their coffins over or steal their buttons. Some of them made of bronze or silver. And they went so far, not just to men in gray and blue, they went so far as War of 1812 and Revolution to dig these people up and flip them over.
That's disgusting.
It's very disgusting. It's disrespectful. It's a sacrilege.
And also, Tom, talk more about your point, Tom. Here's the issue. You might have a state that, will enforce the monuments law, but you'll also have a state like Virginia. They have a monuments law, but it's not being enforced for the most part. Maybe certain counties that will, but others do not, like Richmond. And that's the problem. There has to be harder laws in the books, and also laws that will charge and hold those accountable, those who violate the law, like that mayor. There has been no account under Glenn Youngkin to stop this destruction. It has slowed, but it has not stopped. I mean, y'all saw what happened. Again, Save Southern Heritage Florida. Y'all will learn more about this. Only $25 a year, representing their hat. Proud member of them, and they kept me informed. Our program that was in September, we had Miss Ann McLean on, and Ann McLean, or Dr. McLean, she was a doctor in history, and she was under the Glenn Youngkin administration on history, because they have that. And she spoke on record and said what happened in Richmond was wrong and shameful. And she explained why it should never have happened, how these monuments were put up, all monuments were put up to honor the veteran and help the country heal during reconciliation. And what happened is we've gone so far away from reconciliation to where we're entering a reconstruction by them destroying our monuments. And that's sending a totally different message than what the left and the Rhino right wants to hear. Her statement on that caused her to get fired. Glenn Youngkin, and they fired her. So she did not resign. She was canned. And that's what people forget. She is very well spoken. And this was someone that could have actually helped make change. And Glenn Youngkin didn't want none of it. So this is someone who just took people's votes and is not doing anything to stop what's going on. So it has to be a We the People movement. When there is a Confederate event, we have to show up. We have to come out there. When there's a march, get involved, people. For heaven's sake, Lee Jackson Day, I want to make this a big event, and I want to encourage everyone. I will be there. I'm driving out.
Another thing too, I'm looking at a page right here, and I changed a mind of one of my uncles, of my uncle's wife, that I showed her a passage of a speech by General Forrest from the Independent Order of Pallbearers Association,
which would later become the NAACP, y'all. That organization was like the precursor.
Mm-hmm. And he received a bouquet of flowers from a lovely lady of Lou Lewis, and he stoked controversy of kissing this woman on the cheek, a white man giving, and this white man being General Nathan Bedford Forrest, kissing a black woman on the cheek, and stoked controversy of that because it was so unheard of, and some people not doing well for that, and at the end, and this is what he said and it was a long speech, but I'll get to the latter part of it because this is what really resonated with me, that he said, "We have but one flag, one country, let us stand together. We may differ in color, but not in sentiment. Many things have been said about me which are wrong, and which white and black persons here who stood by me through the war can contradict. Go to work, be industrious, live honestly, and act truly, and when you are oppressed, I will come to your relief. I thank you, ladies and gentlemen, for this opportunity you have afforded me to be with you, and to be sure that I am with you in heart and in hand." And this is the same Nathan Bedford Forrest that everyone calls the founding father of the Ku Klux Klan. And from what I understand, Forrest was not a founder of the Klan, and from what I understand, there's no credible proof that he was ever in it.
That's right. Or affiliated. No shred of credible evidence. And that's the crazy thing is I tell people, our haters, y'all, when you're debating with our haters online, most of the time I just ignore. But once in a while, I say, show me your proof. Because anytime you make a claim, especially with someone who's super far left wing, or you have a rhino in there, they'll go and say, oh, where's your evidence? Where's your sources? We have, ready for this, y'all, this will make some of y'all Southerners really disappointed, a neocon group in New Jersey called the New Jersey Constitutional Republicans. This group, you've heard them, this group, they celebrated Sherman's March to the Sea. So that group, who is celebrating something so awful and so terrible, how are they able to promote something so divisive and so awful? Yeah, and then I would try to tell them, why don't we celebrate other Confederate generals that did things, General Forrest? And then they would give me I did this on purpose. They gave me all the Yankee myth. And I said, show me your sources. Where is the credible proof? Show me a single document. Not a single document exists. The best they have is a kangaroo court trial where they tried to indicate General Forrest, and it completely fell apart. They had no shred of credible evidence. The best they had was testimony, which was hearsay, because in the courts you need hardcore evidence. They did not have hardcore evidence. And Forrest even released statements attacking that Triple K group, saying that it is wrong and it is something that's negative. So you have someone who is a true civil rights leader. He broke the codes in those days. He actually gave this lady a kiss on the cheek and was for integration, much like General Beauregard. General Beauregard, after the war, was a Republican, but more of a true Southern Republican who was for integration, for equal rights and all that. General Forrest, also a true abolitionist. He freed more slaves than Lincoln ever did. Yes,
and there were 43, or no, I take that back, 47 African-American men, though, who were slaves to him at the time, but during the war, he freed them. He said, win or lose, the war is coming to an end, and I'm giving you your freedom. And how many of them went home? Only one. The
majority stayed.
They stayed with him. And one of my favorite people I like to talk about who is a descendant of one of those men, is Nelson W. Winbush. His grandfather, Louis Napoleon Nelson, rode with Nathan Bedford Forrest, and I'm glad to know he's still alive, Mr. Winbush. There is a picture of Mr. Winbush online somewhere, and in a book I found a picture of him as a toddler with his grandfather wearing his Confederate uniform.
That's right.
And I believe there's an SCV camp named after his grandfather in Tennessee.
I think I actually have the book here. Oh, yes, I came prepared.
Yeah.
Hold on one sec.
Yeah. Let me find his picture. I have a picture of it right here. I also have a picture of it.
Also, real quick, to answer your question, Mr. John Bupp said, "Hello, Mr. Vinny. Will you be at the 160th anniversary of the Battle of Gettysburg this July?" I will do my best to make that. I'm trying to do a trip where the camp that I will hopefully, I hopefully will be having a second camp that I'm starting, and we're going to be doing a group trip out there for our camp. That'll be like one of our annual trips.
Yeah, in my reenactment troop, we might actually do that one. Yep, that's the one. Yep, the gentleman right there is Louis Napoleon Nelson, and the little tadpole of a boy right there is his grandson, Nelson W. Winbush.
And this whole book on him, it's Lewis Nelson, Confederate Veteran, a biographical sketch, compiled and edited by Marshall L. Brenton, Jr., Jacob Sumerian Camp, 1516, Sons of Confederate Veterans.
Yeah, and here's also a picture on my phone of holding the flag. And there was a documentary called Defending the Stars and Bars. And there is explaining the meaning behind the battle flag and all the many flags that are right there in front of him. And this guy also is an educator. He was a principal.
And not just a principal, ready for this? He had an Ed.D., which he got his Ph.D. This is a gentleman that's been through some of the toughest times in history when he was born. I think he was born in the 30s.
I think so, yes.
Or no, actually, let me see.
Let me look it up.
He was born, he's 93 years old. He was born in 1929. So he's been through some of the toughest times in American history, and he still managed Ph.D., his proud member of the SCV, proud to fly the battle flag, defends the battle flag, teaches the true and honest history, and that's what we need more of.
Oh yes, and one of my and then of course we have the father of the late, I believe her name is Anna Rice, I believe, or
Maddie Clyburn Rice.
Maddie Clyburn Rice.
She was a real daughter.
A real daughter, right. Yeah. That's her father right there, and you can see on his lapel jacket of a reunion medal that he was not only a member I don't know if he was a member of the United Confederate Veterans, but he is a registered veteran of the Southern Army.
And then even after the war, we had to fight very hard to get veterans to get together, because it was, if you had your flag out, that flag would be confiscated. It was a long process and the women helped out. The women that would, care for the dead, care for all of them. They created the first Memorial Day with Southern women, known as Decoration Day. These women would also then go and advocate at the state level, true statesmen. They would fight the state level, get state pensions, because there was no federal pension for a Confederate veteran. That was given through the state. And those pensions were given to both men of color, women of color. There's a female woman of color. She was a nurse in, I believe, South Carolina, was it? She was a nurse, and she was given a full pension after the war. And in order to get a pension, you had to get verified by your comrades. So you had a Black Confederate veteran. You had two white people that would say, yes, he fought with us, and he would get a pension. So when people want to turn around and say the South is so segregated, so racist, back then it showed that we were more integrated than the USA, because the USA had the USCT, which is United States Colored Troops. It's exactly what they were called. They were a segregated unit led by a white man, where Confederate armies were integrated. And that's the fact that people will never hear about with their history.
And they had segregated reunions in those.
They did. if they were
Yes.
even allowed to attend in certain states, like New
Mhm.
Jersey, they could not
Yeah.
attend. And in New Jersey, it's still sad to say, we're still finding cemeteries of United States colored troops because they were not given a veteran's headstone. And the sad part is you'll see those people have to fight very hard to get them all headstones or even just a mini monument to honor them. The regular heritage groups don't do any of that there in New Jersey. And the GAR, which was for the living Union veterans, didn't do squat for any of them after the war. They just were like thrown in,
They were
almost forgotten about.
thrown over the coals, pretty much. Yeah, that's pretty much. And as a testament of how diverse we are,
Maddie Clyburn Rice.
Maddie Clyburn Rice. Yes, that was her
And
name.
she was a real daughter. So what a real daughter means, we only have a few of them left.
Very
what a real
few.
daughter, I think 2 or 3, a real daughter, and this is a term that the wonderful group, the United Daughters of the Confederacy, use. It's a great group for women that are direct or collateral, which is an uncle. They can prove ancestry to anyone who served in the armed forces, the Navy, or worked in government. They can help you with genealogy. They really do a lot. They've historically done so much to help the veterans themselves, make veterans homes, help the women. And a real daughter is someone who could actually prove that their father was a Confederate veteran. And in order for that to happen, for the most part, because I think we don't have any more real sons, we think there might be one left, but we're uncertain.
I think it's one. I think
one. We might have one.
No.
You had to be born typically in the 1920s, 1930s, because the last Confederate veteran died in I think the 50s.
50s.
Yep, and you had to get a pension. So a lot of the times you had World War I wipes out a whole generation. A lot of young women, and they needed to fend for themselves. And in order to do that, you needed a pension. They would marry the older veteran for the pension, and some of them led to children. I met a real grandson who was, I think, just will be 50 years old. So he's like 49, but I think he's 50 now. I'm like, you're a grandson? And he verified it, which was crazy. And how that worked was a very old veteran married a very young lady. They produced a son. That very old son produced him. And that was the case with President Tyler, who was born in the 1700s. And he has, one of them died, but he has one living son left.
One living grandson.
Grandson, sorry, not son, grandson.
He had 2 grandsons that were still living.
One of them died in 2020.
Yeah, and I believe his son, Lyon Tyler, wrote the catechism of this. I believe he wrote the catechism is what it was for that. That is on sale on the scv.org website.
That's right.
Website in their store.
And how cool is that to say that your grandfather was that man, president?
Yeah, and there's a special reunion that they do in Missouri for the family members of presidents, and I believe Bertram Davis, Hayes Davis, goes sometimes, and you can imagine the conversation that is. You got the descendants of these different presidents, and there was a joke where they go, "Yeah, my granddaddy beat your granddaddy in an election," and they just laugh about it. And then I believe there's a grandnephew or great grandson of Cleveland. And he's like, "Yeah, my grandfather interrupted the election because he was elected and then got beaten. He got elected again."
Oh man.
Yeah. Don't believe they would like the tables turned regarding any of the Union generals' crimes against humanity. The deal at Arlington is ...
That's, I think I know what they mean by that. So Dennis, you are correct. The more people are waking up, and I've seen people wake up, a lot of them, which is good. Yes. More conservatives are waking up to what Lincoln was really like. And we need that because you know what's going to happen? You're going to see how quick, when they start taking down more of Lincoln's monuments, this is going to end real quick. They'll say, oh my gosh, no, put everything back up.
Yeah.
They removed Lincoln in Boston.
Because here, and look, people, it began, hello, Aberforth's tale.
Look at the kitty.
Yeah, 21 pounds even, dude. He weighs 21 pounds. It began back in 2015 over a flag, and look how it progressed.
It began with a flag, and it was accelerated by a Republican that the left jumped on the bandwagon, and then you had other Republicans that accelerated this to further destroy America. And, originally that they would never touch monuments, things that we never would imagine possible in our country.
It began over a flag, and the next thing you know, you see them going after Francis Scott Key's monument, Columbus's monument, and you get this, they go after General Grant's monument, and
or my favorite was this one. we lost a lot of Columbus monuments in our state of Jersey, and the Italians did so many wonderful things for our state, and they get rewarded with nothing. A lot of the Italians here, they've gone down south because they value the South and the Southern culture. During the war between the states, there was 2 Italian regiments. So a lot of Italians do have Southern heritage if they look in there. So the one thing that we had was they replaced a beautiful Columbus monument, and they took away other Italians' heroes monuments, took all that down in Newark, and they put up I think it was a 700-pound bronze statue of George Floyd that is still there.
Yeah.
The Saint of Fentanyl. They put it right up there. And that monument, they said it was temporary, and it's not temporary. It's staying there. Mm-hmm. So, they can do all this stuff.
Yeah. If it's so temporary, if it was so temporary, why make it 700 pounds of metal?
Exactly. How are you going to lift that up easily? No, that's not temporary. That's just psychological shaping.
Yeah. Not even Arnie Schwarzenegger in his prime could lift that.
That's right.
He would have an easier time pulling Excalibur from a stone than picking that up. And
the sword of the stone.
Yeah, you'll have an easier time pulling that than lifting than 700 pounds of bronze. I know of a Franciscan monk who is striving to make Abraham Lincoln a saint. Dude, that nine niet no nunca no bloody way.
Nunca, never.
Nine niet no nun.
Sign language.
No, a big fat negatory, as we say in the South, a big fat negatory, and because
Johnny, that was funny. I think I weigh 700. After our shutdown, because they shut down. Ready for this? In our state, when they did the shutdown, granted, I did not comply with it. They would do mandatory face coverings. They would do all these things. They wouldn't even let you go to the gym or the park. The park to walk and get fresh air. Fresh air does you good. None of that was allowed. No holidays were allowed. And, people gained, they called it the COVID weight. That's.
Yeah. And here's the even more ridiculous. I say people masked up in their car while driving. And
we still see that here.
Yeah. And I make fun of people who wear it. Normally I make fun of people who wear it because I'm like, they tried masking folks during the great smog of London in the 50s during Churchill's second term of premiership. And I'm like, what does that do besides it's theater? That's all it really is. It's political theater showing that the government is attempting to do something. It's political theater, pure and simple. A mask doesn't do jack.
That's right.
Even a Danish medical study said it doesn't do jack. It does nothing. Because you're literally breathing in your own breath and you're breathing it back in. The bacteria, and all that junk. Yeah. But eventually, I have a good feeling people are wising up to what's going on. They did a poll that people are in favor of Confederate monuments. Leave them alone, put them back up, leave them where they are. And even in Virginia, they did a vote about a poll vote about it, and this what really got me happy is like I showed people pictures like Captain Jose de la Garza in his Confederate uniform, and the last general to surrender, Stan Waddy,
Native American,
Holt Collier, a black man, a rifleman, and I've seen in the picture of Reverend Mac Lee.
That's him at a UDC event.
Yeah, and look on his jacket.
Look at all those medals.
All those reunion medals. Yes.
And anyone who's a member, we still honor our ancestors through the use of medals. And I'll never forget some of those reunion medals, and you've gone to a few of them, they're heavy. So imagine how many medals to accumulate that many in a short amount of time. Because the UCV, which was the previous group before the SCV came, it was for the living veterans themselves. They would get together, reminisce, have a great time, remember each other, and they would work to help one another. So if they needed resources, they would get resources. One case was a cemetery plot. And these are stories that really hit the heart. These are people that lost everything in most cases, and they were able to rekindle and, get that sense of community back. And the Sons group, it is our job to protect the legacy of our ancestor. And
Yeah.
I'm always proud to do that. You know, I found one of my ancestors who actually was born in New Jersey, fled to Alabama. He was a Confederate. His brother was a Yankee. He survived the war. And after the war, he moved from Alabama to Florida, where he passed on and is buried there. And it says right in his tombstone, born in New Jersey, CSA. And it was one of the best honors to, you know, be able to join under him, learn more about him. And you'll meet so many great friends in these heritage organizations. So I always tell people, we win this by joining heritage organizations in part because you're going to have standing when you go to, you know, fight these monuments issues. That's step one in a long list of things that we do.
Yeah, and you run into men and sometimes women who in some fashion or so are related to you. And like, for example, our good friend Tina.
That's right.
Here's what's funny. She descends from one side of the Sizemore family, and I descend from the brother. And because her family member through the Sizemore married into a descendant of Pocahontas. And
wow.
Yeah. And what's crazy is and another thing, folks, we are so diverse not only by race or by demographics. We come from many different families, and in some form or fashion, some of us are, well, third or fourth cousins. And who knows, I might, if you all have roots in Arkansas, I'm probably related to you.
Somehow, yeah. Isn't that the best?
Yeah, here's what's funny. I discovered this. My stepmom, my dad's current wife, is my fourth cousin. Her mama and my mama. And here's the kicker. She's related to me through my mother. My dad's first wife. Yes. And
it's when they do the DNA test, like the ancestor DNA, people don't know this, but Puerto Rico was a very small island and it was isolated. So when you do your ancestry, and if you have Puerto Rican heritage like I do, you'll find like all these different cousins of different varieties all over the world. And then Puerto Rico is like this one giant green dot. And it's like, this is crazy. Like Rivera, Sanchez, all these in the last names, which it's like almost like Smith, that equivalent.
And at some of these reunions, at one of the reunions, I met a lady. I forgot. I have unfortunately forgot her name, and I think it was the same time I met you when we were talking to Ronnie. And she's a Lee and a Forrest descendant. And so imagine the pedigree of that. You know,
that's impressive.
It's And you got men like John Hill, who's not just a Hill descendant, he's also a Lee descendant.
That's right.
Yeah. And one of the things he really espoused, especially at the radio interview he gave in Richmond, A.P. Hill was an abolitionist. He never owned slaves. And Holt Collier, big name in bear hunting history as well, famous teddy bear hunt. Yes, that is very true. And he was also the first African American, I believe, to be allowed at the White House at the time.
And he was a Confederate veteran. So
he was a Confederate veteran too. Yes,
there's that too.
Yeah, and a lot of people have no idea of they are in a way influenced by Confederate veterans. The founder of Coca-Cola, a Confederate veteran. The co-founder of the Teddy Bear, a Confederate veteran, or to put it accurately, a Black Confederate veteran. And yeah, he was a bear hunter and trapper and tracker, and most famous for being an expert rifleman. And
you have these great figures like A.P. Hill, who was an abolitionist, General Forrest, who's an abolition, General Clyburn, an abolition, General Lee, an abolitionist, Stonewall Jackson, abolitionist. They all did things to help the Black community to build America back better. Beauregard as well. Jefferson Davis as well. Add him in there because he adopted Jim Limber. People don't know the history, so they have these lies that they just hold on to, these Yankee lies, the federal lies.
Yeah.
And they do this to kind of cover up the true history, because when people start figuring out the real truth of this pointless war that never had to be fought in the first place, that Lincoln raged on innocent Americans, it's pretty scary. And Lincoln is always rated number one in almost every single poll as the worst American president ever.
Yeah. And another thing too, and get this, folks, what is one northern state he never won the popular or electoral vote in both elections? New Jersey.
I know this. Yep, New Jersey.
Yeah, he never won that state. Never won.
New Jersey did not like him, and we were 4 votes away from secession. And we cited, a lot of majority of the states. People, it's so funny. They don't even mention slavery in majority of the states. They cite harassment from the Union. Arkansas is a great example of why they seceded. They couldn't take it anymore with the treatment.
We probably have the shortest articles of secession papers. Ours were probably the shortest among other states that left the Union, who wrote paragraph upon paragraph.
Like a book.
We have the shortest. It's one paragraph, quite literally. We have the shortest, and it was pure and simple. You told us to raise up arms, and in Lincoln, we told you to take a hike, pretty much.
Right.
You're asking me, like you're asking General Fox Jackson up in Missouri, to raise up the 75,000 volunteers to suppress the rebellion, which is against constitutional law and against my state's constitutional law. You're asking me to essentially call the National Guard to go to that state and put them down. And what in itself, by definition, is tyranny. You're asking a bunch of Arkansas boys to go to Virginia, or you're asking folks in Louisiana or Georgia to go into these other states. Lee, Mr. What was the actor's name who played Lee during Gods and Generals? Duvall. What's his first name? Robert Duvall. And I believe, and I read, and I'm not confirmed of this, I believe he's related to Lee as well. And yes, Clint Eastwood has Confederate ancestry, and he's a life member of the SCV, and so is Trace Adkins, the country singer.
That's right. They all and Julia Roberts. People don't know this. She was in the Children of the Confederacy,
and she was also head of the United Daughters chapter too. She was.
That's right. And they even had it in the one article they wrote about her back in 2013, before all this cancel culture bull manure.
Yes.
It said, and they put an edit, and they said, edit. Now the Confederate battle flag means something different. I said, oh, baloney. It did not. It meant the same exact thing, that it was just a regular veterans flag back in 2013. Yes. And they showed her cleaning the graves of the headstones. So that to me was just so stellar.
Yes. And it just, it's quite literally burst the person's bubble here. But yeah, Robert Duvall said it best, and when he was portraying Lee, pretty much I could never imagine living to see an American president invade his own country. And this was the same, and he was portraying a scene where, as when he was Colonel Lee, before he was General Lee, to accept the post of Major General of the Federal Army, asked to suppress the rebellion. And this was post Sumter. Mm-hmm. Let me pull it up real quick, because there was just a very, very powerful, and it's a really great movie too. Gods and Generals.
I love that movie.
I love it too. And it took me a long time too to realize that Stephen Lang, who plays Stonewall Jackson, played General Pickett during Gettysburg.
That's right.
Yeah. Not only do these movies were great, they had probably the best musical scores.
Also, tell the viewers a little bit while you're looking that up. What inspired you to start Ozark Flaggers? Because I really like that idea.
Well, part of it was when I saw your New Jersey Flaggers and Virginia Flaggers and the Delta Flaggers, and I thought to myself, what if I started an Arkansas Flagger group? And turned out there was, but it's defunct. It's just like it's there, but no one's messing with the social media of it. And I thought to myself, okay, there is, and I don't want to get into a copyright spat with nobody. So I thought, what about Ozarks Flaggers? Because between Missouri and parts of Oklahoma and almost all of North Arkansas and the Valley is called the Ozarks.
That's right.
And even the college I went to is called Ozarks, founded at Cane Hill by a Confederate veteran. Its first founding president, a Confederate veteran. And I have his portrait too, and we'll get to it in a second. And man, gotta love an ad. Thank you, YouTube, for the ad, but we don't care. Come on, give me the ad. Get it. But yeah, I formed Ozarks Flaggers so that so I can include both people from Missouri, Arkansas, East Oklahoma to do flagging, or hopefully when I start back work again, I want to buy a bunch of flags in bulk and start putting grave stick flags on the graves.
Excellent.
Oh yeah.
If you have what I would do too, because I don't know if we might get copyrighted for that. If you take the link and just put it in the comments down below, because I don't know what the policy is in the copyright.
But pardon?
I don't know what the policy is in copyright, like for a video.
I don't know either. I don't know either. But
perhaps you know there might be great outcry for secession.
Yeah.
It's not as you. My country, Mr. Blair, only for you to serve your country. My country, Mr. Blair. I never thought I'd live to see the day that the President of the United States would raise an army to invade his own country. No, Mr. Blair, I cannot lead it. I will not lead it. I'm sorry to hear you say that, sir.
Yeah. Yeah. I would never live to say. I would never. I didn't think I'd live to see the day that a president would invade his own country. No, Mr. Blair, I cannot lead it. I will not lead it. No. And I have the same sentiment. If I was in the military right now and I was called to invade, to pretty much bring in the shock troops on my own state of Arkansas, I would never do it.
No, I couldn't do it either.
I couldn't do it.
You got to be a statesman.
And that is the fine line too. You're either a politician or a statesman. And
yes, you are.
And it's a dying art, being a statesman. It's dying. And that which it's like chivalry and good manners, and it's dying. It's not dead but dying. And
that's right.
And yeah, and probably to be a great, and I believe that statesmanship is what's lacking in this country. It's honor, it's dignity, and it's pride forgotten, and been replaced by what I essentially called Washington, D.C. People call it a swamp. I call it a snake pit.
Oh, it is. It's definitely a snake pit. It's evil.
It is.
We've had people like the one guy, we're trying to hopefully get him on here, but he's running against Chris Smith. When I did a segment and it covered all the monument movers from every state, telling people who to vote out. New Jersey put up for re-election Jeff Andrew, who was a former Democrat until 2019, and Chris Smith, who refuses to take questions on anything. The guy's been in office since Jimmy Carter, is extremely, not even from New Jersey either. I think he lives in Virginia. He pads his wallet up, very, liberal in ideology, anti-monument, anti-veterans monument. Both him and Chris Smith were the only two Republicans from New Jersey in Congress who voted to remove monuments out of the Capitol. So I said, anyone who's a descendant of General Lee, General Wheeler, Jefferson Davis, you can thank them. These are two Republicans that did this.
Yeah. Then
we've been out this for almost like an hour and 30.
An hour and a half. Yeah.
That is, Corey will be a regular here, as well as Victor. We're going to be doing our little panel things. So, newest member for Unapologetic. Hopefully get John on as well. He'd be really good. We're going to have fun discussions. We got a lot coming up, y'all. And this layout's going to change again. Getting the trial from StreamYard. We're going to be upgraded. So any last words for the good of the order?
Stay Southern, my friends, is all I got to say.
That's right. And go to your events, and I love how the quote was like the perfect way, like to really like end this too. Yeah. Be a statesman, go to your events, support your local camps, join a history group, get involved and do something, because to sit there and just to think the ballot box will fix everything is wishful thinking. It is on us, we the people.
Mm-hmm. Oh, yeah.
All right, y'all. Deo Vindice. Is it, how do you, everyone says it differly. Deo Vindice?
I say Dio Vindice. I've seen people say Dio Vindice, and I've heard it. I've probably heard 3 different variations of it, and I say Dio Vindice because that's how most in some Latin sounding pronunciations in Arkansas that's how we say it.
Dio Vindice. All right, y'all. You all stay Southern, and we'll see you until next time.
All right.